Welcome to the Creative Ops Compass podcast, your navigation system for turning creative chaos into strategic impact. My name is Jesse Krinsky. I'm a creative operations consultant. I help in-house creative teams streamline workflows, improve stakeholder relations, and elevate their role as strategic partners.
Working through concepts first without budget guidance is like driving with your eyes closed.
Today I'm speaking with Joel Kaplan, founder of MK3 Creative, a Boston area creative agency. Joel's been in this business nearly 30 years, working with everyone from small internal creative departments to major corporate teams. During that time, he's seen the mistakes that so many in-house teams make when they're trying to work with external partners. He knows what information gets left out of briefs, which questions never get asked, and where the communication breakdowns happen that cost both time and money. Today we're diving into how to get the most value from your agency relationships. We'll talk about what should be in a creative brief, the importance of upfront budget conversations, how to manage stakeholder access, and what separates long-term partnerships from one-off projects. If your team works with external agencies or you're thinking about bringing in outside help, this conversation will show you how to make those relationships work better. Joel, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm really happy to have you on here.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Jesse.
So I want to have you on the podcast for a few reasons. One is I've always liked working with you. We've worked together for a few years, but also you have worked with in-house teams for so many years. You must have seen so many changes and evolutions over the course of the last 30 years. And you've worked with all kinds of in-house teams. To begin with, I want to get your thoughts on a few things. One is, what is one of the most common mistakes or challenges that you see with in-house teams in the intake process when working with external agencies?
So one of the key and critical things for us is a well-written brief. The brief is such a critical piece of information that starts the process. What are those critical pieces of information that we need to understand? Because if we're going to put together a pitch, a budget, the more information we have is going to save everybody time, meaning both sides of the equation. So if we can come back to you with better thought out creative and budgets that match that creative, you're going to have a better use of your time deciding what direction to go in if we get good information and then come back to you with well thought out creative and budgets.
So when it comes to budget, there's a divergence of opinion on whether or not and to what degree budget should be discussed in the beginning of the process in the intake. What are your thoughts on that? Do you ask for your client's budget range up front, or do you work through some concepts first?
Yes. So working through concepts first without budget guidance is like, driving with your eyes closed. So if it is a pitch and we're up against other agencies, then we still need to at least have budget guidance. We don't want to come up with a $10,000 idea when the budget range could be 100 to 250, because then you have a better idea of what you're trying to produce. So whether it's an exact number or a range, it's going to save time for both parties, the in-house agency and the outside agency. So there should be that more in-depth conversation. And then before you get to budgeting, you're going to want to have a conversation with the in-house agency to discuss parameters, and then maybe throw out a couple of back of the napkin ideas and say, okay, this idea is going to cost between X and Y, between 25 and 50. The next idea B, could be between $50,000 and $100,000, and ask the question, are those ranges that you think are within your budget? Would a good idea give you the ability to get more budget, or do we need to start with a range that you know is acceptable to the stakeholders?
So speaking of stakeholders, does your team typically get the access that you all feel you need to accomplish your goals of the project? And if so, what advice do you have for in-house teams to be able to get the stakeholders to be willing to meet with external agencies?
It's a great question, and it definitely can be a problem. But we always ask in the beginning, who are the stakeholders and where will they be involved in the project? At what point will they come in for approvals? And it's often discussed up front. And when we put together our project timelines with distinct milestones, we often ask that the stakeholders, the senior executives, stakeholders who will have input on this, get involved not just at the very end. Because if you wait till the end, then obviously you know what's going to happen. People are going to change the direction. It's going to cost more money than what it was budgeted for in the first place when you start having scope changes. So we often ask if we could at least get a half an hour session with the key stakeholders to hear from them. And they're often very willing to do that, so that we do get a chance to ask them questions, hear their vision. Even if it's from a 50,000-foot view, we do get to understand the project a little bit better, and we try to do that up front.
So what kind of questions do you ask the stakeholders that you may not be asking the in-house creative team?
Well, it comes down to their vision, right? So you get all the basics. So you get the questions out of the way about primary, secondary, target audience, how are you measuring it, what is success? But then often a question that doesn't get asked that we try to ask is, have you seen other things that you like? Can you show us examples of what's inside your head? Because often people have a vision for what they're seeing or what they're expecting. So I know that we're not out there to copy other people's creative, and we don't, but we do get inspired by a lot of other people's creative. So we often ask that question. What have you seen? What do you like? What messaging? What's the pace? What's the timing? So those are questions that could be asked of a senior executive, a senior stakeholder, to get that information directly from them.
So what are some things that in-house teams tend to overlook when they're sending a project out to bid?
I think what can be missing is the creative approach. Are there ideas that have been fully fleshed out from the beginning that you want to give the out-of-house agency the ability to create, come up with concepts to then present to you? Or are there fully fleshed out ideas that the in-house or the line of business has in mind that they want to continue to develop? Because sometimes that's not always clear, and that could be really helpful to us as the outside agency, because where do we spend our time? And not only is it about time, but it's about dollars. Do you have 1, 2, 3 even concepts that you want to present? Or do you have concepts in-house that you're working on that we maybe should enhance, flesh out a little bit further, or, not spend time on things we don't have to?
So really clarifying what the creative direction is that they want to see for the project. That's something that is often missing or not robust enough.
It's not, well, robust enough could be part of it, but I think it's not always clear that what is our role in the project. Because as an outsider, we could come into many projects at different points in the project timeline. Do you need us to spend time coming up with creative ideas, or can we put the budget into production?
So when you're working with a new client, what questions do you ask to get a sense of to what degree they want to be involved in the creative process? How do you sort of suss that out?
Yeah, I think you just have to be honest and approach it with integrity and ask the hard questions. We always know about the budget, right? That's always a hard question. Sometimes people are very forthright. They give you a budget, they give you a budget range. But I think the other thing that's missing is where is the involvement and who are the decision makers? Because we've seen it happen so many times that we'll get so far down the road that then wherever we are in the creative process, whether it be script writing or storyboarding or even a version one, who are the people that are the final decision makers? Because we want to know that up front for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to ever backpedal because then it's time and money. But two, you want to make sure you get that input early on in the process so you don't have to go back and redo things that have already been approved, but may not have been approved by the senior level management that really has the final say. So asking those questions up front, who are the decision makers? Where will they be in the process? And when can we talk to them? Now, people could get insulted by it. What do you mean? I'm the decision maker. Well, are you the final decision maker? So you have to be cognizant of how you ask that question. So I understand you have a review process. Are you the final decision maker, or should we build time into our project timeline to include other decision makers? So it's a little touchy, but you can't be afraid of asking those questions.
So a big part of this is the interpersonal side of working with creatives. So when I was in-house and working with external vendors, I sometimes worried that I was getting too deep into the weeds. I was micromanaging. Maybe I was overthinking it, or maybe not. But how do you handle situations like that? If, let's say, you think that the creative who you're working with in-house is stepping on the toes of your team a little too much.
Creatives are notoriously sensitive. We know that. And you have to manage the personalities from the beginning of the process. And I do like overthinkers. I like people who can micromanage, but you have to be able to say to somebody, that's a great idea, but it doesn't fit in right now. Or that's a great idea, let's address it in the next round. Or that's a great idea, but we don't have the time or the budget to really flesh that out. I think it's saying to somebody in a respectful way that we appreciate the input and we'll look at it, but you got to be able to come back and say at some point, it really is not the right time or the right place to do that, because what it could happen, it's going to add budget, it's going to add time to a project, because most of our clients come to us because they have a deadline. But I love overthinkers. I have overthinkers on my team, and we work with overthinkers. But you have to balance it out because there are other constraints that go along with it. So you have to accept the input, but then you have to be able to figure out what's the right thing for the project that you currently have in place. Will it affect other things?
You're reminding me of something that was so central to any kind of creative production, which was whenever you're faced with any kind of decision, it could be the script writing, a shot list, even a specific edit, cut point, is always keeping in mind who is the audience and what is the message. And there's more than that, but those two especially, because if you get distracted by shiny objects or personalities or preferences here and there, and you lose focus on those main points, the project is not going to succeed in the way that it was meant to. So it sounds like you're saying that something that is essential to you and your team is making sure you always basically keep your eye on that ball, even if your clients might lose focus here and there. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think you do have to manage your client, but you bring up a good point. If they are getting down into the weeds, then you do have to bring them back and bring them back quickly. I think one of the other things that's critical to this process is you have to know, to your point, who your audience is and how to communicate with them. So if they're taking you down a rabbit hole, you may have to figure out a way to bring them back. Because, for example, for me, I want bullet points. Self-admittedly, Jesse, you were somebody who wanted the details. So I think you have to be cognizant of that and manage the person that way. We all have a common goal and we have to get there. So you have to make sure that people on both sides know that.
MK3 I know has a number of longstanding client relationships. What is the basis of those relationships? Why do some companies stick with you, with your team?
You have to treat every project like it's new and it'll be the only project you're working on for this team. Because people don't remember yesterday. They only remember your last project. So every project has to be treated with 100% enthusiasm or 110% enthusiasm from a creative perspective and a project management perspective, because creative is critical, but project management is as critical to the project. So there's two sides to the equation, but you have to make sure that you're giving it 100%. The client feels like they're getting 100%, and you have to do that every time. Because once you screw up, you're out the door.
So not resting on your laurels is really key.
Never.
Because also your clients, whoever is managing the relationship, may leave. They may leave the company. And if your relationship with the company is based on that one person and not necessarily on how the work is viewed, then you're building a house on a faulty foundation. And I absolutely agree that having a very strong project management is a foundation of the creative process. And that makes perfect sense in theory, but the reality is that nobody manages just one project anymore. Everyone's juggling multiple priorities. So how do you help your clients and your team maintain that 100% standard when everyone is stretched thin?
I often find that, and this could be on either side of the equation, either the in-house team or our team, people get overwhelmed, right? Because as you've seen in the past 10 years or maybe longer, everybody's doing more with less. So what I often do is check in with my team or on the other side, the client side, and say, what's keeping you up at night? Are you having trouble prioritizing? Do you know what's most important in the bigger picture? Whose deadlines are looming? What is truly a drop-dead deadline? Or do we have time? Or can we pick up the phone and say to somebody, I know you told us the date for delivery was February 15th, but is there anything stopping us from delivering on February 22nd? So the idea of open communications and helping people prioritize is very, very important part of managing the whole process. And sometimes, to your point, micromanaging or micro thinking gets people down in the weeds and they don't see the bigger picture. So it's critical to check in and see where they are in the process, because nobody manages just one project anymore.
That's a great point. I often will recommend to my consulting clients, when they're doing kickoff meetings, for instance, a question about deadline that is often overlooked is the question, what's driving this deadline, right? Not just to take the deadline as gospel, but ask that question. What is the purpose behind this deadline? Because it may be that there's an event coming up. Well, you can't avoid that. That is black and white. Or it may be somewhat arbitrary. And if you can find that out, then you know that may give you some leeway. It also may give you the option to say, if we can improve the project for X, Y, or Z, is there some flexibility in the deadline for that? And than to have that in your back pocket. But if you don't ask that question about what's driving the deadline, then you're flying blind a little bit there.
Right. Exactly.
Joel, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I always enjoyed working with you and your team. It's great to be able to have the opportunity to speak with you like this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Jesse, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you too. I've always enjoyed our time together, our relationship, and we've always had a mutual respect for each other. So good luck, and can't wait to hear the podcast.
So let's recap the key insights from today's conversation. First, start with a solid brief. The more information you provide up front, the better the creative and budgets you'll get back. You're not just saving the agency time, you're saving your own time by avoiding rounds of revisions that could have been prevented. Second, talk about the budget early. Whether it's an exact number or a range, give your agency partners that information so they can propose ideas that actually fit with what you're trying to accomplish. If your stakeholders don't have experience with this type of project, have that conversation up front. Throw out some back-of-the-napkin ranges and see what's realistic. Third, get your stakeholders involved early in the process. Build time into the project timeline for key decision makers to weigh in. Ask them what they've seen that they like. Get their vision up front. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for scope changes, blown budgets, and starting over when someone at the top finally sees the work. Finally, when things get overwhelming and people are buried in projects, check in with your team and your stakeholders. Ask them how they're doing. Ask what's driving each deadline. Is it event or is it somewhat arbitrary? That question alone can give you leeway and help you prioritize. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and leave a comment. Let me know what creative ops challenges you're facing. What topics would help your team work better? And if you work with in-house teams, whether you're an agency partner, a stakeholder, or a freelancer, I'd love to hear your perspective too. Reach out through the contact info in the show notes. Thanks for listening.